On July 6, 2009, 80,000 people packed the Santiago Bernabéu, not for a match, not for a title, just to watch one man set foot on that pitch for the very first time. Cristiano Ronaldo had just been bought for 94 million euros, the most expensive transfer in football history at that moment, a number so staggering that even Real Madrid's own supporters could barely wrap their heads around it. When he appeared under the floodlights that night, the stadium erupted. Flashes everywhere, thousands of voices screaming his name at once. This was not a player presentation, it was a coronation. He was 24 years old. He arrived from Manchester United carrying 3 Premier League titles, a Champions League, and a Ballon d'Or. And yet he stared out at that stadium as though everything still remained to be proven. Physically, he was no longer the same wiry kid who had landed in Manchester 6 years earlier. His body had been sculpted into something else entirely. Broader in the shoulders, denser in the legs, a power that was visible even before he touched a ball. Pellegrini placed him on the left wing, free to cut inside and strike with his right. From the very first match days, opposing defenders understood they were in for a long season. He could hug the touchline, slice towards the center, shoot from distance, or beat his man in a single touch. No defensive scheme could contain him because there was no prepared answer to someone that unpredictable. In his very first official Liga match, he scored against Deportivo. Then in the next, then again, and again. 4 consecutive league games with a goal, something no Real Madrid player had ever done before him. In the Champions League, the same rhythm. The Bernabéu stands were beginning to grasp that they were watching something they had never seen before. Then in October, an ankle sprain kept him off the pitch for 7 weeks. And that's when Madrid understood something important. Without him, the team was no longer the same. They played. They no longer frightened anyone. That absence said more than any end-of-season summary ever could. He came back, and the machine restarted. 33 goals in 35 appearances across all competitions by the end of his first season. For most players, that is the peak of an entire career. For Cristiano, it was simply the starting point. The summer of 2010 changed everything. Raúl left, the number 7. It is a legacy, the number of legends. The moment Cristiano put it on, something shifted, in his own mind and in the minds of the supporters. He was no longer simply Ronaldo, he was becoming CR7. At the same time, José Mourinho arrived on the Bernabéu bench. A man who had just won the Champions League with Inter, beaten Barcelona in the semi-finals with 10 men, and whose mission at Madrid was as simple. Looked at Cristiano and understood exactly what to do. He gave him the freedom to leave the wing and attack central spaces. He managed his energy, shielded him from defensive duties, asked him to channel everything into the decisive moments rather than burning himself out chasing the ball for 90 minutes. Gradually, the spectacular winger transformed into a complete striker, more positional, more dangerous. But the first Clásico under Mourinho was a disaster. The Camp Nou, 5-0, a humiliation, one of the heaviest in the club's history. Cristiano stared at that scoreboard and something inside him ignited that never quite went out again. For everything that remained of that season, every sprint, every shot, every goal carried the mark of that night in Barcelona, as though each action was a personal reply addressed to Barcelona. He finished with 53 goals in 54 appearances across all competitions, a number that looked frightening just written down on paper. And then came the Copa del Rey final of 2011, against Barcelona at Mestalla. After 90 goalless minutes, extra time, the game looked to be heading towards penalties when Di Maria picked the ball up on the left wing and whipped across into the box. Cristiano rose. In a stadium full of Barcelona supporters, surrounded by 3 defenders, he suspended time for a fraction of a second before placing an unstoppable header into the net. What followed became the stuff of legend. He ran to the corner flag, slid across the pitch, and screamed at the sky. That scream, that image, was the culmination of everything that season had represented. That night, Madrid supporters adopted him completely. He was their warrior. The following season hammered the point home. Madrid lifted the Liga title with 100 points, an absolute record at the time. Cristiano had scored 46 league goals, including the decisive strike at the Camp Nou that officially sealed the title. Opposing defenders admitted it in press conferences without shame. They had no answer. His movement was too unpredictable, his finishing too precise, and his ability to appear in the right space at the right moment made individual marking pointless. Under Mourinho, he had gone from a phenomenon to a force of nature. From the very first day he set foot in Madrid, Cristiano had only one obsession. Not domestic titles, not Liga records, the Champions League. And between 2010 and 2013, he played some of the finest football of his career. Individual performances that would have been enough to carry almost any other team through. Except Madrid was eliminated in the semi-finals 3 times in a row. Against Bayern, he missed a penalty in the shootout. The image of that ball drifting past the post. Against Dortmund, he watched Lewandowski score 4 times and extinguish his team in the intensity that few players reach over an entire career. But those 3 years did something unexpected. They accelerated his transformation. Under Mourinho first, then under Ancelotti, Cristiano gradually shed the instincts of a winger. No more lung-busting runs the full length of the pitch. He learned to read spaces differently. His movements became sharper. And then the 2013-14 season arrived. Ancelotti replaced Mourinho. The BBC trio took shape: Bale, Benzema, Cristiano. And for the first time in years, Madrid had an attack built to free Ronaldo rather than confine him to a role. He scored in every single Champions League group stage match. He dismantled Schalke with 4 goals. He sank Bayern at the Allianz Arena with a brace. By the time Lisbon came around, the final against Atletico, he had already scored 16 goals in the competition. Injured, not at 100%, and yet, in extra time, he scored anyway. His 17th goal in a single Champions League campaign, a record that still stands today. That night in Lisbon, Madrid lifted La Décima, the club's 10th European Cup, the one supporters had been waiting for since 2002. 12 years of waiting erased in a single night. And for Cristiano, this was not simply a trophy. It was the end of a personal countdown that had been running since the day he signed for Madrid. The Champions League was no longer his obsession, it had become his kingdom. After La Décima, many expected Cristiano to ease up, to take a breath, to enjoy it. He did the opposite. The 2014-15 season produced numbers football had never seen at that pace. 61 goals across all competitions, 48 in Liga alone. Hat-tricks coming every 2 weeks, 5 goals in a single match. Long-range strikes that left goalkeepers frozen on their line before the ball had even crossed it. He was no longer just winning games, he was settling them on his own. What made him truly terrifying at this stage was no longer just pace or power, it was intelligence. He no longer wasted his energy dribbling down the wing for 70 meters. He waited, he read, and when the space opened, he arrived half a second before anyone else, capable of finishing with either foot, with a leap in the air that defenders could not mathematically deal with. Defending against him had become an equation with no solution. If opponents pushed high, he caught them in behind. If they dropped deep, he found the space to shoot from distance. There was no right answer. Yet despite those historic numbers, Barca's MSN, Messi, Suarez, Neymar, swept everything that year. A treble. Madrid were knocked out in the semi-finals. The genius of one man, even at Cristiano's level, was not always enough to carry an entire team to the end. It was a brutal reminder that football, at the very highest level, is never won alone. Then Zidane arrived in January 2016 to replace Benitez, and something shifted in how Cristiano was used. Zidane had understood what many managers before him had missed. You do not ask Ronaldo to cover every blade of grass across an entire wing for 90 minutes. You protect his legs, focus his energy, and unleash him when it truly matters. Ronaldo still finished that season with 51 goals in 48 appearances, and in Europe, he became unstoppable in the knockout rounds. A hat-trick against Wolfsburg to turn around a tie that had seemed lost, the decisive goal in the semi-final, and the final penalty against Atletico in Milan to bring home an 11th European Cup. The following season, 2016-17, was the perfect proof of what Zidane had built. Cristiano had started slowly in the Liga. Some said age was beginning to show. They did not understand what was happening. He was saving his fire for the matches that mattered. And when those matches came, he burned everything in his path. It was not just the goals, it was what he radiated before the opening whistle. That way of walking onto the pitch in a Champions League knockout game with a look, a stride, a certainty that said without a single word that the match was already decided. Defenders admitted it. They were sometimes beaten psychologically before the game had even started. That season, Madrid also won the Liga title, Cristiano's first league championship since 2012. He scored the decisive goals in the final stretch, as if to remind anyone who might have forgotten that he was dominating Europe and Spain at the same time. But what was about to follow, nobody in modern football had ever achieved. Winning the Champions League once is the Benzema created space with his movement, and Cristiano simply waited for the final touch. In the group stage, he scored in every single match, the first player in history to do so. Then hands up to give you an ovation, words become unnecessary. But Juventus did not let go. In the return leg, they pushed all the way to the end. And in the 93rd minute, a penalty for Madrid. Cristiano took the ball. No excessive run-up, no hesitation. Perfect strike, far corner. Madrid were through. In the semi-final, Bayern again. Ronaldo again keeping Madrid alive. And in the final in Kiev against Liverpool, he did not score. But his presence weighed on every single second of the match. Defenders never got a moment to breathe. The game unfolded differently, but Madrid held on. 3 consecutive Champions League titles. No player in the modern era had ever done that. 5 Champions League titles, 4 of them with Real Madrid. He was no longer simply the competition's all-time top scorer. He had become its face. At PSG, Neymar had arrived like a prince. At Madrid, despite 450 goals in 438 appearances, despite 4 Champions Leagues in 5 years, he no longer felt that unconditional love from the club's leadership. He wanted a contract that reflected what he represented. He received signings and expected the club to stand by him publicly in the past tense during interviews. Supporters did not want to hear it, but the words were there. Cristiano was already saying goodbye. Juventus offered 117 million euros. Florentino Perez accepted. And at 33 years old, Cristiano Ronaldo left Real Madrid. At an age when most players begin thinking about life after football, he was still sprinting like a 23-year-old and scoring in Champions League semi-finals. He did not want to fade out quietly. He wanted to conquer another league, prove himself in another country, write a new chapter. When he left the Bernabéu for the last time as a Real Madrid player, it was not the end of a transfer, it was the end of an era. In a club that had seen Di Stefano, Raúl, Puskás, and Ronaldo Nazario shine, Cristiano had rewritten Madrid, the way football supporters around the world watch the game. Tactically, his evolution had been a masterpiece. From wide winger to penalty box predator, he had reinvented himself each time his body demanded it, proving that intelligence and relentless work could sustain what tactical systems were still being built around the idea of stopping him, and he kept scoring anyway. When people look back at this period of football, Cristiano Ronaldo's prime at Real Madrid will stand apart. He did not simply play for Madrid, he became Madrid. And even after his departure, the echo of his goals, his celebrations, and his nights of glory still resonates through the stands of the Bernabéu. Cristiano Ronaldo was not just the best player of his generation. At Madrid, he became eternal.